Oh, I've gone back. I'm so sorry. There we are. What do you make of this image? It's a famous model called Kendall Jenner. She's offering a Pepsi to a nice-looking policeman. An act of kindness, friendship, or perhaps something deeper. You probably recognize it from a very, very famous, very recent, and rather ill-advised commercial campaign by Pepsi, which caused a worldwide protest. Great cries that here was a sugary drink company piggybacking on the back of social activism, of using protest in a kind of Disney-fied fashion, making a mockery of protest. And of course, there is a great deal of protest going on in our world today, online and on the streets. And what with a general climate of fake news and politicians who constantly seem to change their minds on the basis of which way the wind is blowing, I found myself thinking more and more about authenticity, why it's important. We, each and one of us in this room, know that innate authenticity is what makes the world go round. Each and every one of us has to struggle and mine down very deep within ourselves to find our core authenticity in order to really make waves in the world or in our personal life or in whatever situation. To be truly authentic, to be truly yourself, to recognize what it is that you believe in and you stand for. Now, the funny thing is that all human beings are born authentic, aren't they? If you look at a very small child and you play a piece of music to them and you see how they react, they're probably moving, they might well be singing along. And yet, certainly in the rather dried up culture from which I come, by the time they're 10 or 11, they've completely lost the ability to move and respond freely to music in that way. Because somehow they've learnt that we have to conform with others. We have to find appropriate ways of behaving which are like all the other people that we observe. And of course, we obsess ourselves with footballers or pop stars or fashion models or great musicians of whatever sort. We want to be like them. And in wanting to be like them, we lose touch with the fundamental part of who we actually are. Now, I'm a conductor. My day job is conducting orchestras around the world. It's an amazing way to make a living. But let me tell you, in the early years of my career as a conductor, I really couldn't find my authenticity because I was trying so hard to be like all the great conductors. I was watching them at work and trying to imitate their movements. I was listening to their performances and trying to imitate those as well. And of course, in so doing, I was an empty vessel. I was kind of hollow. My gestures had no real implicit value. They were pretty to look at, but meaningless. And orchestras spend a lot of time making fun of me. There was a joke that one member of an orchestra told me when I was about 20 during a rehearsal break. He said, "Charles, what do you think the difference is between a bull and an orchestra?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. What is the difference between a bull and an orchestra?" He said, "Well, with a bull, the horns are at the front and the arseholes at the back." Yeah, it took a long time for me to find that authenticity. Now, of course, authenticity in a conducting sense is simply about recognizing that you are unique. We are all unique. Every person on the planet is different from every other person on the planet, and therefore has something unique to say. It's not like my performance of a Beethoven symphony will be better than anybody else's, but of course it will be different, and therefore it has value. Now, an amazing experience during my life has been the opportunity 12 years ago to form a new opera company out of the rural townships of South Africa. These are some of the most ridiculously talented, musically talented communities it's possible to imagine. And very quickly, having auditioned around about 2,000 people, we assembled a company of 40 amazingly talented young singer performers. One of the first shows we did was Carmen, a great grand slam opera by Georges Bizet. And very quickly, we had a bit of a backlash from the rather conservative, old opera-going, opera-supporting audience of Cape Town, where the company was based. These people were saying, this is inauthentic for black singers from a township to be performing this Eurocentric form, opera. This is inauthentic, inappropriate. More to the point that Carmen is an opera about bullfighting. Now, black people in a township in South Africa, they know nothing of bullfighting. Again, this is inauthentic, they cried. How often is it that one group of people will try and diss another group of people by trying to shout at their inauthenticity? Well, here's a fact. Georges Bizet, French composer, wrote Carmen, which is an opera about Seville, a city in Spain, a country he never even visited. So already we have a deeply flawed or inauthentic premise, don't we? Carmen, a Spanish story written by a Frenchman. So we put this to the opera-going fraternity of Cape Town. They weren't particularly impressed. But you know, there's a much more fundamental aspect of the authenticity that I discovered amongst these black South African singers, which is in the way that they emote, the way that they sing, the way that they carry line, the way that they characterize the parts in a story like Carmen. You see, if you're me and you're a conductor and you're preparing an opera, say in London or in New York, you will spend a portion of time early on in the rehearsal period coaching the singers. You know, working through their arias with them, working through their big set pieces, finding the best possible way forward for them and how they might serve the show, the particular production. Now, 10 to 1, if you're working with a singer in London or a singer in New York or any number of other places, what you're dealing with is very, very dry technique. You're talking about, shall I vibrate a little on that note? Maybe I could pitch bend there. What color of vowel shall I use for that particular word? All well and good, technical stuff. But what it's not about is the emotional core, the emotional truth of a particular line, of a sentiment, of a musical phrase. That in a way, if one talks in such kind of highfalutin terms, the singer might get left behind. Now, with a South African singer, you never talk about vibrato, pitch bend, vowel color. You talk only about the truth of the line, about the characterization. So, of course, already, before having even started, there is an authenticity there. Because you're not asking the person who is singing Carmen to be like all the other Carmens, or to be like an appropriate Carmen. You're simply inviting that Carmen to be authentically herself. Now, I want to play you a little clip of one of the most famous arias from Carmen, the Habanera, and I'm going to first of all play it to you as sung by not a South African. Have a look at this. It's like she's saying, I'm very sexy. I'm very, very sexy. Be afraid, all you men, because I am very sexy. Yes, you see? Eyes that kill. Little jerks. All well and good, ladies and gentlemen. Very artful, isn't it? Great technique on display. And a consummate sense that she is playing a vixen. She's playing someone who knows that everyone in the room fancies her. Okay, let me play you, by contrast, Pauline Malafane from the South African company that we started, singing the same role, and see if you can sense the difference. Here, I would argue, is true authenticity. what I'm saying? It's a completely different order of connection. You know, that is Pauline Malafane, Carmen. It's not putting on a suit of clothes marked Carmen. Interestingly, Prosper Mérimée, who wrote the novella Carmen, upon which Bizet based the opera, he said, if you want to understand the nature of Carmen's eyes, look at your cat, the cat's eyes, while it is stalking a sparrow. I think we got a lot of that from Pauline in that clip. I'm going to show you another little moment from later on in the same show. Here's another European performance. These are gypsies, by the way. Oh, gypsy acting. Oh, look at the hips. Oh, it's a bit of leg. All right, and here's the South African version. Again, I think of authenticity of a completely different level. So, from what I've been saying to you, you can probably appreciate that this company was very difficult to get airborne because there was such a negative drag factor all around it in its home country. And it took for the company to go and play in the West End of London and to play on Broadway and to tour many other parts of the world and to make that award-winning movie before the old opera-going fraternity of South Africa were prepared to admit its authenticity. And here's the thing, if you want to lead change, you have to believe in your innate authenticity and trust it despite the flack. And there were really times when, I don't know, I almost feared for my life. There was such vitriol around what it was that we were trying to do. Now, another thing that I discovered and was delighted by in the context of my South African adventure was in these same townships I've just been talking about, which are so innately musical. Again and again, I would come across people playing musical instruments, playing them brilliantly with utmost virtuosity. But the instruments themselves were not conventional. You know, a guy playing a violin, it wasn't a violin like you and I know a violin. It was actually something he or she had made themselves out of an oil can and a bit of wood and some strings strung across and a bow made out of a bit of bamboo stick. Or a drum, the same, or a trumpet, or a guitar, all homemade. You know that amazing phrase of Nelson Mandela's, necessity is the mother of invention. If you're innately musical, you have a story to tell, you want to tell it through a certain instrument, you can't possibly afford to buy the instrument, so you make your own. And the authenticity is about your determination to make that shitty old instrument sound awesome, right? This violin I'm talking about that I heard, made out of an oil can and a bit of wood, sounded as good as a Stradivarius because of the sheer authentic will of the person behind it. You know, a great instrument is all well and good. They're quite attractive to look at. But actually, any great instrument will only really lift off and become a vessel of soul if the person behind it wills it so. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to take that idea back to the first world? I say the first world. The UK is hardly the first world anymore, is it? It's more like the fifth or sixth. But anyway, let that rest. I thought, would it be interesting to see if we could create a whole orchestra of instruments to be played by orchestral musicians in London, but where all the instruments were made from rubbish? Would it be possible? So I set up an 11-week challenge, some of the leading instrument makers throughout the UK, and I said, I want a complete symphony orchestra of instruments from you, please, but you can only use materials that you find on scrap heaps and in recycling centers. Now, the project was interesting because, of course, it was very difficult. There were many tries, fail, try, fail, instruments falling apart, instruments just sounding rubbish, instruments that actually injured musicians while they were trying to play them. It went forward and back. It was very stressful, particularly because at the end of this 11-week period, I decided that we would play at the BBC Proms, which is the world's largest and most prestigious orchestral music festival, that we would play, this scrap heap orchestra would perform, live on TV, etc., etc. But the big thing was, once we'd more or less got the instruments as good as we could, was finding a way of willing those British orchestral musicians to will the instruments to sing and to sound amazing. Again, to find that authenticity within them. And at the end of the day, it fell to me, because of my innate authenticity and belief in this project, that was what spread like wildfire. And in the end, the musicians were able to take it on. And look at this. What an amazing finale to the project. I'm guessing you thought that sounded fairly authentic. I think it did too. Authentic in a very earthy kind of way. I think Tchaikovsky would have been quite pleased. And in honesty, where there is a will, there's a way. And there's one very final project I want to just quickly share with you, which has, in a way, taught me more about authenticity than anything else I've ever been involved with. My youngest child was born 10 years ago with cerebral palsy. And a few years into her life, I started to wonder why it was that I don't meet musicians with disability in any of the orchestras with which I work anywhere in the world. And with London 2012 fast approaching as it was, and the Paralympic Games and so on, I thought it was time to form a new orchestra, a virtuoso orchestra, but with the one core difference that every musician in it has a disability. Now, the thing that has been so interesting about working with these musicians from the British Para Orchestra is the degree to which they are truly authentic in everything that they do musically. To give you an example, normally when musicians decide to improvise together, there will be a terrible long pause before anyone does anything, because everyone is fearful of looking like an idiot and making the wrong call and doing the inappropriate thing. So everyone sort of sits on their hands, waiting for someone else to start first. And that pause can go on for an awfully long time. It's very embarrassing. Now, with the first 4 musicians of the Para Orchestra, the whole process from sitting down to making glorious music took about 5 minutes. Because if you're in a wheelchair, or you're visually impaired, or you don't have hearing, whatever your impairment might be, you have an innate don't give a toss kind of attitude towards life. You don't really bother. You don't sweat the small stuff. So there is naturally, therefore, an authenticity which shines through. You're not trying to conform or to be like anyone else. You are truly and uniquely yourself. The project's gone from strength to strength. It made its debut at the closing ceremony of the 2012 Paralympic Games. It's now touring abroad a great deal, doing all sorts of amazing collaborative projects. And again, has been very hard to bring to life, because so many people have a problem putting the words disability and excellence into the same sentence. Even though we've had the Paralympics now for over 50 years, which has proved beyond reasonable doubt that people watch the Paralympics because it is world-class sport, not really because it's about disability. The same should and must be true in music. So I want to leave you now with a beautiful performance, the British Power Orchestra, of a song which is entirely appropriate to my theme today, True Colours. The idea of finding within yourself and within those around you a deep sense of possibility, of potential, of seeing beyond the external, the distracting, to the true, pure, unique authenticity within each and every individual. And as you see this track start, the first voice you hear is from Lynn in the Power Orchestra, who has cerebral palsy and cannot speak conventionally. And just before this recording took place, we found a new technology which means that she can sing through her computer. So here she is singing for the very first time in her life. The choir singing with the Power Orchestra are from North London. There are 100 of them. They're all children. 25% of them are profoundly deaf, and they all sign as they sing. It's a really beautiful thing to watch. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Here is the British Power Orchestra.
Charles, it's such an honor. Such an honor. Thank you. Thank you. You're such a...